Hi chaps, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. And in this video we're going to talk a bit about a common issue, or at least an issue I always have. You know, you come across that moment in time that you want to adjust the valves on an engine, and then you keep spinning around that crankshaft to find the right position of the camshaft to adjust the clearance of the valves. It can take a hell of a time. So I got fed up with it, so I developed my own little method, which is very easy to do, and you don't have to spin the crankshaft too many times around. In fact, you only spin it around twice to adjust all the valves. It's applicable to any four-cylinder diesel or any four-cylinder gasoline engine, but it has to be four-cylinder and it has to be a four-stroke engine. So before I show you how I've done it or what my method is, I'd like to take you through some reasons on why my method is working. Now, personally, I really hate it when I'm watching things and I don't really understand what's behind it or what's going on, and then people just show how to do things, but they don't explain why they do it like this. So if you bear with me for a few minutes, I'd like to explain you that. But of course, if you know everything about four-stroke engines, then don't worry about it, okay? So here we go. All right, so let's start. So before we start explaining on how I come to this method, you need to know a few things. Well, first of all, you need to know what the firing order is of your engine. So typically one cylinder fires, then another fires, then the third one fires, and then the fourth one will fire. And that's what we call a firing order. Now on a diesel, that's going to be an injection order. Now I'm going to do this whole thing on a Massey Ferguson 35, by the way. So anyhow, so first thing you need to know is my firing order. Now typically you have a 1342 or a 1324. What does that mean? Well, 1342 means cylinder 1 fires first, then cylinder 3, then cylinder 4, and then cylinder 2, and then the whole thing starts all over again. So that's the firing order. This is something you need to look up, and it's very easy to find. Once you've got that down, you need to look at your engine itself, and then you need to look at where are your cylinders. Now, which is your first cylinder? Now, typically the first cylinder is the one nearest to the radiator, and my radiator is supposed to be here, but it isn't at this moment in time. But that's where the first cylinder is. So, and then you just count backwards, cylinder number 1, 2, 3, and 4. Once you've got that done, then you need to find out what valve is what, because there are two valves, or maybe four valves, but there are valves for outlet, there are valves for intake, and you have that per cylinder. So that's something you need to look up as well. So easy to do, and the way I'm doing this, if I can find it, here it is. I've got my exhaust manifold. So normally that's mounted on the engine block, like so on the side, and then the valve which lines up with the gate on my exhaust manifold, that's an out valve. And the valve that lines up with your intake manifold is your intake valve. So that's pretty easy. You need to know this because we will have to be watching the valves when we're doing all the work in a few minutes. Well, all the work is a bit exaggerated because it isn't that much work. Alright, so now let's talk a bit about a four-stroke engine, because we're talking about a four-stroke engine, and we'll do it on the board in a few minutes so you see exactly what I mean. So, a four-stroke engine has 4 strokes. It means that the piston is moving twice up and twice down for different purposes. So before an engine can run, you're going to need to have fresh air in the engine. So there's going to be a stroke which we call the intake stroke. When the piston is going down, it's going to suck vacuum and it's going to pull in air from the outside. That means that the inlet valve has to be open. Now once the piston has reached its bottom dead center, it's going to start moving up again. And that moving up after the intake, that's what we call the compression stroke. It's going to compress all this air very heavily, and when the piston reaches its top dead center, then ignition will take place. So we got already an intake stroke, we've got a compression stroke, and now we have combustion. So this mixture of gas and diesel and air now explodes, and it's so forceful that it forces the piston down. So this is what we call the labor stroke. So now the piston is going down. Now of course during the compression stroke and the labor stroke, the valves, both valves have to be closed, because otherwise you would lose compression or you would lose power during the labor stroke. So once the piston is now at its bottom dead center after the labor stroke, the cylinder is filled with exhaust gases, and these gases need to be evacuated from the cylinder. And that's happening when the piston is moving back up, and it's going to push out those gases, but therefore your outlet valve has to be opened up. So timing of valves is very important, and you need to adjust the clearance of your valves at the moment when the compression is happening, or at the end of the compression when the combustion is happening. That's the right statement. When the combustion is happening, when the piston is at its top dead center, just after the compression stroke and just before the labor stroke, that's the moment in time you want to adjust the valve clearance, right? Because that's the right position of the camshaft, because it's the camshaft that is driving the valves, and the camshaft is driven by the crankshaft. And we'll be looking at the crankshaft markers on how to adjust all that. But let me show you that on a board on how that all works. Now if you're okay with all this, then you can skip straight to the practical part, but I'm still going to explain it because I have this kind of a disease trying to explain too much. So let's have a look at it. So guys, let's have a look on how we are going to do this. First of all, we're talking about a 4-stroke engine, and we talked about that already, that it's having 4 strokes, and I identified the strokes over here. I stands for intake, C for compression stroke, L for labor stroke, and O for outlet stroke. The star or asterisk, that's the moment in time when we get diesel injection or combustion. T stands for top, so the piston is at the top. B stands for bottom, the piston is at the bottom. We are going to be looking at a firing order of cylinders 1, 3, 4, and 2. Now this could be any other one, but I'm just giving one example, and if you have a different fire order you can go through the same thing. On the right hand side I have kind of a little bit of a matrix. Now don't get scared of this, it's not going to be difficult, but we have a timeline that runs like this. So let's have a look at cylinder number 1. What has to happen with cylinder number 1? Well, cylinder number 1 will have to have combustion at some moment in time, and this is going to happen when it's at its top dead center. So let's pick any line. I'm going to pick the middle one. So we know this is the moment in time we want to have combustion of piston number 1, and we also know that then the piston is in the top position. At that moment in time, both the inlet and outlet valve are fully closed. That's the moment in time you want to do your valve adjustment. Okay, so now let's work the time back a bit. We go back in time. What happens before we get combustion? Well, very simple. We get what we call compression, right? And the piston was going up and both valves were closed. So that stroke upwards is half a rotation of the crankshaft. What happened before the compression cycle? Well, before compression we had to fill up the cylinder with fresh air. This is what we call an intake, and the piston was moving down, and during the intake cycle we had the inlet valve open and the outlet valve closed. Okay, so now we work our time forward. We've got the combustion moment. What happens? The piston is forced down and we have what we call a labor stroke, right? Now the piston is going down. Both valves stay closed. And once the piston is at the bottom, what happens? It's going to move back up and it's going to evacuate the gases. And this is what we call the outlet or exhaust, right? So this is the out. All right. And then the whole cycle repeats all over again. Intake, compression, labor, out. Intake, compression, labor. And now the engine is running. So that's good for a single cylinder. And you can see that our crankshaft has rotated how many times? It was at the top. it's down at the bottom, it's at the top, it's back at the bottom, and then we go back here. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4. So the crankshaft has rotated 2 times. That's what the crankshaft did. 2 full rotations. So every 2 rotations of the crankshaft, you get 1 labor stroke. Now with a 4-cylinder, you get every half a rotation of the crankshaft a labor stroke, which is good because it will make the engine running so much smoother. That's why you have this nice sound on an 8-cylinder, on a 6-cylinder, right? Not on a 4. Anyhow, so what's the next firing order after cylinder number 1 fired? Well, that is cylinder number 3. So let me just draw now cylinder number 3. Well, cylinder number 3 has to have its combustion right after this moment in time when the crankshaft has evolved half a rotation. So here we have to have combustion for cylinder number 3. Going back in time again, we have compression. We have before the compression, what? We've got an intake. And what did we have before the intake? Well, we've got an outlet, right? Out. All right, what happens after the compression cycle? Well, we've got labor. Labor, and piston is going down, and then it rotates again, and we go all the way back. All right, so what's the next firing order? We already did 1, 3, now we're going to do 4. So let's draw cylinder number 4. When does cylinder number 4 has to have its combustion? Well, it should happen at this moment in time, right? And this moment in time is the same as that moment in time because it just wraps around. So I'm going to start drawing from this side if you don't mind. All right, so combustion happened. It's the same spot. This one is the same as that one. Combustion happened, and what follows? Well, it's labor. I need to shake my pen every so often. What happens after the labor? Well, we got out. Right, piston moving up, piston was moving down. What happens after the outlet? Well, again, we now get intake, in, and then we got compression. And then we have combustion, labor, and now we run. So we've got fire, fire, fire. Great stuff. We have 1 cylinder left, which is cylinder number 2. So let's draw cylinder number 2. All right. When does cylinder number 2 has to fire? Well, it has to fire right after 4. 4 was here, so here is where cylinder number 2 needs to fire. What happens before the combustion moment? Yes, right, compression. What happens straight after? Labor. What happens after labor? Exhaust or out. What happens after out? We have intake. And then it circles. So now we have a running engine. Combustion, 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 combustion. So now we've got a labor stroke every half a rotation of the crankshaft. The way I apply the method is that I'm going to put markers on the pulley mounted on the crankshaft. It's going to be very easy. If this is the pulley, so I'm going to rotate the crankshaft until I have the first cylinder in this position right here. Because now I know that the outlet valve is just finished closing and the inlet valve just started to open up. And that is a very visible moment. At that moment in time, I will place a marker on the pulley and on the engine block, right? And they need to align. It doesn't matter where you place it. And then I'm going to draw an artificial horizontal line through the center of the pulley, and I mark opposite to that another marker on the engine block. Now, so at this moment in time, I should find another cylinder which is having its combustion, because then both valves are closed. So if I scan from this point down, well, this is not because it's sitting near the point. Oh, well, I've got cylinder number 4. Look, cylinder number 4 is right now having its combustion, so I can adjust at this moment in time cylinder number 4 with those two valves in that position, okay? Right, so now if I rotate the crankshaft half a rotation, now I know after 4, 2 is coming. So let's look if that matches up. So we were here. The next thing that will happen, because we got combustion on 4, the next combustion is cylinder number 2, right? So this is this one. So this is now the one we want to adjust, which is right. And does it happen after half a circle? Oh, guess what? Yes, it does, because between that point and that point we have half a rotation. So now I can adjust this cylinder number 2, like I marked. Rotate the crankshaft another half rotation. And now I can actually adjust the next cylinder, which is number, just look it up. What's the next one after this? It's that one right here, right? So it's this point. So now it's cylinder number 1. And I rotate it one more time, half rotation, and then I can do cylinder number 3. So this is how this works, and I'm going to show you that on how to set that up. Now all this sounds very complicated, but it isn't complicated whatsoever. On a board it always is a bit confusing, and of course we cannot interact properly, but it's easy, guys. I just wanted to explain you on how I came to this method with just 2 marks on the engine block and then having the numbers. Now if you had a different firing order, which is very well possible, maybe you had a 1324, just do this all over again, right? And you will see exactly what you have to do. And it works with any firing order. Now, I don't think there's many more firing orders than a 1342 or a 1324 because the way the crankshafts are built. But you never know. All right, so now let's look in practice. All right, so with the explanation on the board, now we are ready to actually do the work. This is the crankshaft and the pulley. There's no markers on it whatsoever right now. I just put a swing on it so I can rotate it. Now rotating the engine may be a little bit tough sometimes, so I remove the injector so I don't have to overcome decompression all the time. But nevertheless, and on the top here we have the first cylinder basically, and we will be watching those valves until they are in the right moment. So the first valve that I'm having is my outlet valve, and the second valve is my inlet valve. So for the outlet valve, I'm going to keep rotating the crankshaft pulley in its normal rotation until I see this valve here finishing up its closing time, and the inlet valve, which is next to it, it starts to open up. So let me just do that to find that spot. You may have to turn a couple of times in the beginning. So let's watch it. I'm going to run and run. Okay, so now you see it's opening up. So this is basically pushing out the exhaust gases right now. So now I keep rotating it, and now it starts to close. Now what's the second valve now, right? Oh, it just started to open up. I don't know if you saw it, but I'll take a close up later. Now, with that in place, I'm going to place a marker on my pulley right here, and hopefully you can see it, and if not, I need to come up closer a bit. There we go. And I'm going to do the same thing but just opposite on the other side. So I'll need to remove this, and I'm going to take a ruler and stick it straight to the center and mark it on the other side on the engine block. So let me give you a close-up on that, what I've done. So here are the markers, and now I can align cylinder number 4, and then I can do number 1 if I rotate it, and I'll put the markers up so it makes it a bit easier, and I can do cylinder number 3, 2, and 3 on that side. So that's all I need to remember. Now, we already went through this, and the alignment is just based on the firing order, so we know now that we are ready to align cylinder number 4 with the first cylinder right in the middle between its exhaust and intake cycle. So in this position, and we haven't rotated anything else, we can adjust now the valves on cylinder number 4. So now we're going to rotate the crankshaft half a rotation until the markers line up on the other side. All right. Sorry guys if I'm in the way. So now the markers are lined up, and now I can adjust cylinder number 2. I rotate the crankshaft 1/2 turn again until it lines up again where we started. Now I can adjust cylinder number 1. And now finally, I rotate it 1/2 rotation again, and I can adjust cylinder number 3. And this is how it works. Alright folks, this is it. I hope you enjoyed this, and this was a very pragmatic and easy approach. I know it took a lot of explanations in the beginning because I wanted to give you that explanation, because it is important that there is a good understanding on why I do things in a certain way. Feel free to come up with your own method, but this method works just fine, and if you place the markers you can make them permanent. But remember, always look at the first cylinder, that those 2 valves have to be in the right position from the start, because otherwise you could be off. So that's your reference. So thank you for viewing, and if you have any comments, feel free to make them. I'm always willing to learn. And thank you for watching my YouTube channel. I have lots more videos on the Massey Ferguson coming, and other engines, and Lotus Elise, and so on. So stay tuned, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.